Greetings, humans. Zenbot1496 here, back from a major maintenance cycle with a review of the third season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, the finale of which streamed on Paramount Plus last night. Now, to recap our baseline on Star Trek, the show is humankind's primary pop culture goalpost for the progress of its own civilization. Or, at least, that is the apparent image projected into the cosmos that we get out here. Now, the show presents a positive future vision of humanity with multiple instances of intergroup equality and progressive thinking ahead of where human culture actually happens to be. This has been shown from the show's first broadcast in 1967 through to the present, albeit this effort is also balanced by a fair amount of straight adventure stories and some real clunkers. At the same time, as the franchise has gone through multiple iterations, it has been influenced along the way by the gravitational pull of different forces, such as the blockbuster space opera storytelling of Star Wars, and then the mystery box storytelling of Lost, leaving us with shows that struggle to maintain a fix on what to hold on to and what to innovate with. Which is where we find Star Trek Strange New Worlds. We enjoyed the first two seasons of the show, as they have a jaunty, punchy flow in delivering compelling visions of the future. Notably, the lengths Captain Pike goes to back Una's legal rights, and then Starfleet's outcome, that sequence stands out in our databanks. However, we've actually seen elements like that before in Star Trek, with Kirk and Spock, Picard and Data, and Sisko and Bashir. It's almost like Strange New Worlds is establishing that, yes, it can do a Star Trek, before rolling out the boldly going where no Star Trek has gone before, at some point in the future. Now, with nearly 2 Earth years between Season 2 and 3, how has the show grown since then? Alas, not really. From a story standpoint, we get a conclusion to the Gorn attack cliffhanger to start the season, which was important to get us back to an episodic normal. In prior seasons, having an episodic normal seemed to be a benefit. We had a self-contained story every show, like the original show, unlike most modern television, which is one big story arc strewn over several episodes where the beginning may have no connection to the end. This is one of the reasons we filter movies ahead of TV shows for Zoggplex. TV shows in general have a hard time telling a complete story, sometimes because they get cancelled too early, and sometimes because they simply don't have a plan. And Galactizens prefer to enjoy a complete story, instead of being led around in circles and having their attention stretched without any payoff. Now, Star Trek Strange New Worlds tries to have it both ways, with episodic A plots that are loosely strung together into a season's B plot. This season, they leaned more into the having fun with it aspect they showed before with a musical episode and a crossover with an animated Star Trek series, but this season they did a lot more of that, just more integrated into the shows themselves. Spock is doing ballroom dancing. There's a documentary-style presentation in another. A holodeck episode where the cast satirizes the original show, and for some reason, half the bridge officers become Vulcan and they play it for laughs. Ortiz has a solo survival episode, which is actually a lot like that one good episode of Galactica 80 when Starbuck is marooned with a Cylon. At first, this all felt like they're really just having more fun with it this time, but after ingesting the whole season, it feels like the balance is off. They're focused on the Tribbles side of the delivery of the original show, but actually losing track of the opportunity to say something compelling, at least in their individual episodes. Alas, their season arc story doesn't fare much better. It's fairly derivative as well, feeling more like a Doctor Strange movie with magic doors and facing off against a two-dimensional evil. There were a couple of bright moments to this, however, when we got an emotional life's path laid out and a meaningfully logical preview on how James Kirk and Spock initially connect. Both are nice, but both are table stakes here, and unfortunately the credibility of what we're presented with often fails. As we pointed out with Star Trek Discovery, a lot of the plot logic, it fails in order to deliver character moments, and the passive behavior of secondary characters and bystanders observing our heroes doing their thing, that frequently defies any kind of logic as well. Well, how are those characters, at least? This is where we have quite a bit more luster. Uhura, played by Celia Rose Gooding, continues to be both dazzling and resourceful, although this season we now see how she balances loyalty against playing by the rules. Now, this by itself is nothing new to Star Trek. This is, in fact, Kirk's defining characteristic, or at least his most consistent one. However, we don't see this from the rest of the bridge officers in Star Trek, plus the breaking of the rules is never against each other, as it is when Uhura does it now. This truly caught us by surprise, and in a good way. Uhura got her own Kobayashi Maru moment, and her solution is startling. Anson Mount continues to deliver a charming and considerate Captain Pike, showing compassion and care for his crew, and a very real sense of pending loss when destiny keeps interfering with his relationships. He is the anchor for this show, and helps lift scenes when the remaining elements are somewhat poor. His comic timing and delivery forced a chuckle from us, even while we were cringing through the Vulcan transformation episode. Ethan Peck continues to deliver a credible and nuanced Spock, despite having the largest shoes in Star Trek to fill. And Rebecca Romaine continues to bring us her clear-minded and effectively authoritative Una. While Pela, played by Carol Kane, continues to have such a drawn-out and exaggerated delivery that she gets teased for it, her lines are mercifully short. Plus, in the season finale, Melanie Scrofano's Captain Battelle finally gets something to work with and delivers an emotional payoff that we were absolutely not expecting by this point. But, as usual, the overall quality of the show comes down to the delivery of the theme. The franchise theme of Star Trek says that when you explore the unknown, our own diversity and compassion can help us face what we find. As applied in the Star Trek franchise, the most resonant instances of the original show and the original movies, The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, demonstrate that solutions can come from embracing our differences, understanding our commonalities, and sometimes sacrificing ourselves for a greater good. That's where the drama comes from, the tension between the self and the other, and finding ways to resolve it in a meaningful way. How does this season of Strange New Worlds fit into this? Well, it's a bit of a challenge. Star Trek shows and movies, for that matter, have become more adventure serial with absolute stakes, a very clear good and a very clear evil, a bit like mythology or religion or Star Wars. One sees that clearly here, complete with an archaeologist character essentially reading Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces to the audience. No, we really don't need that read into the record here. Star Trek has operated for decades by playing with allegory, not the black and white of the light side and the dark side, but the shades of gray that we see around us and within us. In Star Trek, the Federation is a stand-in for the United States, and the Klingons for the Soviet Union. And that has allowed Star Trek to comment on our world, the human world, from a position of relative safety that both fiction and non-fiction often struggle to express without fear of censure or tuning out those it seeks to enlighten. Ronald Moore, who wrote and led the narrative for Star Trek The Next Generation in some seasons and its early movies, brought that approach to his reboot of Battlestar Galactica as well. That show offered a nuanced critique of the morality of brutally interrogating prisoners, mirroring the behavior of the United States itself during its second Iraq War. This was when nothing else was able to say anything much about it. The rally around the flag effect had stifled the media and virtually all other outlets. Today, Star Wars Andor has picked up the baton, explicitly showing how a fascist tyrannical regime can push an individual out of complacency in Season 1, and then the gut-wrenching sacrifices necessary to stand up to that regime in Season 2. Ironically, while Star Wars has over time softened the theme of Star Trek, the best Star Wars in decades is the one that takes a massive injection of Star Trek in the arm. And that is where we find this and most other Star Treks lacking. They make a lot of noise, but they don't actually say much, if anything at all. This season of Strange New Worlds does demonstrate some sacrifice, but its purpose lands without real meaning or connection to the characters. The conflict seems bolted on. If you missed one episode, you have had little to no context as to why everyone does what they do in the finale. Also, the elephant in the room is that there is no elephant in the room. This Star Trek stepped up to the microphone and had nothing to say about the real world. Star Trek has previously spoken out about racial justice, Vietnam, the Cold War, the environment, endangered species, nuclear power, capitalism, dehumanization through technology, artificial intelligence, forced relocation, queer acceptance, genetic manipulation, and essentially every issue the speaking culture of the United States is involved in. And yet, today, the United States is at the center of a fascist movement, with a self-serving authoritarian leader slowly breaking down the admittedly work-in-progress systems that aim to deliver equality and equity to most of the people in that country. He exemplifies the spectrum of self versus other, where he most assuredly is motivated by what is good for himself. This is the drama at the heart of Star Trek, not good versus evil, but the good of the one versus the good of the many. And being too timid to address this stark issue right in front of your whole planet is simply a failure to be Star Trek. Given this mix of factors, where the writers are having maybe too much fun being silly with the characters, but the characters themselves are endearing and meaningful as a group of people, while delivering part of the theme of Star Trek, the sacrifice aspect, but lacking the courage to go full Star Trek, Season 3 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds earns our mixed rating. And so concludes this human version of our review. If you have feedback on it, please write in your own comments so that we can upload the galactic version to Zoggplex. Ahead, we have Alien Earth wrapping up its first season soon, so we'll plan to discuss that. We are working on a special guest to offer commentary, so hopefully that will help broaden the perspectives we present. We still haven't tried to watch more than one episode of Foundation. It's season 3. The degree to which the show breaks from the books is so vast, we really cannot take it in more than small doses. That either means we won't be watching it, or we will watch it just to see if there's anything sacred left in that galaxy. However it turns out, you can expect more discussions and reviews of theatrical movies, streaming shows, and 4K home video releases, as we continue to engage with your human rectangular entertainment. So, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you can, please comment, so that we can continue to have the human voice reflected in the cosmos. Until next time, farewell, humans.